Welcome to the new Cyber Frontier, bringing you the latest news and initiatives that focus on the development of cybersecurity economics. You don't have to be a computer or cybersecurity expert to get plugged in. Your host brings it straightforward, asks the tough questions, and brings the cyber world to a level of understanding for everyone. You can find us on the web at www.newcyberfrontier.com. Now join our host as he introduces the topic for today's new Cyber Frontier.
Welcome to today's episode of New Cyber Frontier. On today, very excited, we have John Greaves, the Director of Global Standards Architecture for ConsenSys Health. Among other things, IEEE Secretary for Blockchain Healthcare and Life Sciences, and Chair for IEEE Global Standard on Harmonization efforts, as well involved with ISO, convener of working groups for automatic identification and data capture, and absolutely my MV voice for radio. We're going to hear it in a second here, but welcome for coming on, and thanks for coming on today, John.
It's a great pleasure, Chris. Good to be here. You run a great podcast.
Thank you, and definitely, and I want to have you on more because I heard the first time I heard your voice in a standards group, I was like, it wasn't video or anything. I was like, who's that? That's what I want to sound like. How can I get there? So maybe someday. But your involvement and the things that I've seen you do, and the breadth of where you're engaged in blockchain. And if you haven't guessed today, we're talking a little bit about blockchain and some global standards with that. But I just am really excited about this show and even series that we're going to do more on what's going on with global standards and global developments in blockchain. But thanks for coming on today. And if you would just give us, kind of in your words, a couple minutes about your background and how you got to the point you got to.
Certainly. First of all, I started out life as a merchant seaman, frankly, so that has nothing to do with anything that I do now. I came into the supply chain and logistics environment. I graduated into basically barcode, radio frequency identification, sometimes called electronic barcodes, real-time location systems. And at each step of the way, I looked to the left and the right as one should, except barmen who only have tunnel vision. But I looked to the left and the right and found out that whilst my technologies were stumbling along and achieving significant success, anyone who goes grocery shopping understands barcode, well, may not understand its technical context, but know that without it, tapping in XXYY as they used to, for those who may remember, though there are not many of us left, was a real pain. So we've had so many advantages from AIDC in all of its forms. What I then found out, approximately 5-6 years ago, I started picking up on this thing called blockchain. And I looked at it and I said to myself, oh my goodness, this is quite something, because this is what one has been waiting for. Because when you work in AIDC in the supply chain, you run into that terrible thing of departmentalization, of not in my backyard, or not in my loading bay, or not in my manufacturing plant, or not in my warehouse, etc. And I thought this really could really work, but it won't work on its own because it is a metaphysical technology, whereas AIDC is a physical technology, meaning I don't know any server rack that's going to jump out of its rack, run downstairs and check that a pallet of beans arrived. That's what AIDC does, but AIDC has some challenges. Its equipment is not yet blockchain ready. It handles 96-bit records, 126, but it's in kilobits, not in trillions of bytes that can handle seamless and continuous data. So I said to myself, let's take this on. So I basically rode two horses, AIDC and then AIDC in blockchain. And I have largely now taken blockchain to be my only horse. And yet I feel I'm still pulling along the old nag of AIDC because it's so complementary.
Yeah.
I think that.
Definitely. And let's take a break, hear from our sponsors. We'll be right back to talk to John Greaves some more. Be right back.
Cyber Resilience Institute helps build strong cyber communities designed to prevent members from attack. Like building a neighborhood watch, it takes coordination and a sharing community to protect our identities and valuables in the virtual world. Typically, we hear that organizations know they need to do something to protect their cyber assets, but don't know where to begin. Let Cyber Resilience Institute help your community create an action plan. Cyber Resilience Institute will build your community or business marketplace so that it is designed to support a collective cyber defense. Contact them for more information at cyberresilienceinstitute.org.
Welcome back to New Cyber Frontier. On today, speaking with John Greaves, Director of Global Standards at ConsenSys Health, as well as IEEE Blockchain in Healthcare, and ISO Working Groups Chair, and several others. We won't go through them all again. But John, you were talking about the background in AIDC, which I'm not sure that many people would know that. Automatic identification and data capture. In 30 seconds, can you kind of elaborate on what that is a little bit more?
Yes, certainly. It's all of those things that we've come to take for granted. It's barcode, and when you leave the store and the cashier removes that big white chunky thing, that is a form of AIDC. That's anti-shoplifting. Sensormatic and checkpoint tags. There are other manufacturers. They're the brand leaders. It's the toll pass on your car. It is the means by which you have a 1356 NFC communication format that allows you to pay for things on plastic with your phone, etc. These are all forms of AIDC technology. They govern basically our lives. They were started in 1977 with a barcode and a packet of Wrigley's spearmint gum.
That is perfect, and it's the examples are probably better than explaining what it was. That these are the things we use in everyday life that are those physical things that are tracked in supply chain, so we can record them, and everybody's used to, oh, it's in the system. I've heard young people get pulled over by the police and say, hey, I don't have my driver's license, but it's in the system. People rely on that in the system nowadays so much that something that wasn't existent when in earlier years will say, I remember that I wouldn't even expect that something be in the system. I could just tell somebody that and have them check on it and be okay with that. But it seems to be a status quo now.
It is so funny you should mention in the system and driver's licenses in the same word. There is about to be published for the first time a uniform standard for driver's licenses that are virtual. They are in the system, and they will be recognized across all policing, and those permitted to examine or require a driver's license as proof of identity, or, as you say, pulled over. So isn't that something? Mm-hmm. You're on the ball, and yes, you could totally understand it.
Definitely not something I'm relying on too heavily, but when we start talking about blockchain and all your work you're doing in the standards, and before the show we talked about a big word of warning almost, but the what has happened over the last year or so due to COVID and blockchain? Give us your kind of take on what we've seen that might even be a little bit alarming.
I actually find it very alarming, Chris. What I've found is that pre-COVID, there was a certain deviation from dedication, particularly from government agencies. One might almost say even a fear of it. Mm-hmm. It doesn't look like a career path to a Fed is something called blockchain. It looks like a disastrous thing for a financial regulator, and it might have Treasury interested as to whether they can pick up your tax through a blockchain. And everybody looked at it cryptocurrency-wise, when in fact it's a massive tool. Blockchain's real ticket is that it is in effect the architecture and the system for the post-Turing information technology change that we have so sought over the years. Alan Turing, as you know, created information technology in its historical or legacy form, pre-blockchain. And I thought that's what everyone had clearly started to understand, and that government would be the first to rush out and do something about it. Australia has, and others, but it unfortunately COVID came, and that I found that significant government agencies, not just the United States, not just a state or a county or a French city or a German state, or you name it, they've all dismantled or at least diverted the resources, both human and capital, to COVID fighting. That's good. That I understand. I appreciate it, although perhaps some of it was a little too apolitical. In notwithstanding that, that move is good for nobody. Why? Blockchain would actually solve so many things. Clinical research for COVID-19 and following coronavirus episodes that will continue to occur. Blockchain is recognized already by clinical research communities. I myself was on a massive webinar with the European Union yesterday morning at the crack of dawn because of their time frame, talking about medical device and clinical research with blockchain and how the regulatory agenda needs to prescribe and proscribe for it. And I believe every single country should have what the Chinese have created, namely a massive central agency for blockchain digital ledger technology that they are imposing on their trade and industry and using their best efforts to own that farm. Interesting.
We just kind of bounced into a country has done this, has not slept, has massively funded it because they see the value in it. And what value do you think that gives at the expense of who?
Blockchain is a trust system, first and foremost. Secondly, the continuum of the data string that goes with a blockchain is such that the originator of a product or good that also originates within a blockchain environment will most likely control the fate of all and any goods or services in that blockchain. As such, may use it to manage, manipulate, maneuver a adverse outcome. Now, am I being sinister, Orwellian, Hitchcockian even? Actually, no, I'm flagging it. And I spend my life flagging it and saying, where is the state of Florida's, which is where I live, hence my comment, why isn't the state of Florida, to the best of my knowledge, and if I don't know about it, then it hasn't, I would guess, got a state agency for blockchain development? Why isn't it, there are a number of academic agencies in Florida, or academic centers of excellence, that have created themselves as blockchain centers, but they also have stumbled from getting started because the student body isn't there at the moment. And then you ask yourself, we do, in my opinion, have an excellent governor. And I'm surprised that we haven't got some kind of hoorah going where Florida leads in blockchain, Colorado leads in blockchain. I don't really care which state. I'm just talking about the one I sit in. But I'd like to see that, and I'd like to see amongst the agenda of the current administration in the United States, in Canada, where they have an outstanding example of a working blockchain, which is Walmart, which has got numbers that are beyond belief in terms of impact, savings, greenness, you name it. And let's not forget, Chris, blockchain has a huge green content. I can't do it today. You and I would have to do a green content special on blockchain, but believe me, it's huge.
So, and I know we've talked before that Colorado has actually, in the past, tried to put some resources and emphasis, and I think it was led the way with some legislation, but also probably, been kind of quiet here over the last year with COVID. Likewise, that you said with other initiatives that were out there, and you kind of working at the global standards for blockchain, you've seen who's continued to go and who has kind of faltered. When we get back, we'll talk more about what kind of a jump that gives us, or what kind of a jump that gives China and other countries that have taken that initiative during this kind of quiet time. We'll be right back after this message from our sponsor. Welcome back to New Cyber Frontier. On today with John Greaves, the Director of Global Standards at ConsenSys Health, working in several chair positions for IEEE, ISO, and global standards around blockchain and automatic identification data capture. But John, before the break, we kind of announced that, talked about during COVID, that the efforts that you saw prior to that took a back seat in many areas in the world because of fighting the pandemic. And now post that, some particular agencies or governments had said, hey, this is a big thing that we can capitalize, get ahead on. And mentioned China was a country that spent a lot of time, a lot of resources in this over the last year, which already probably could be foreseen as one of the economic leaders in the world, if not the most powerful economic leader as a country. And they've realized the economic value here. Is it at this point, have they made a jump so far that they're going to corner this and take over in this technology and be kind of de facto standard? Or what do you see moving forward?
What I really see moving forward, Chris, is that the Chinese, and let's be quite clear about this, the Chinese are admirable people, a great country. It's historically fascinating. I thoroughly enjoy my visits. But I think what they see is, rather than take a commercial dominance by managing a standards outcome where you must do it that way if you are to be compliant, in a blockchain world, as you know, the holy grail is interoperability. Mm-hmm. That interoperability is set at XX and is set by a third party who own the XX. Then you have a problem, because you are going to have to subscribe to the XX platform of standards, bearing in mind the blockchain. We believe, those of us in the standards community who are somewhat 5 years into standards in blockchain, of which the first 3 years was just getting our act together, which it takes on a global basis. Ask anyone, and we're not slow or stupid. It's just very difficult to pull together multiple countries and get an agreement that everybody will come out to play on this particular subject. But if you consider that we now are in motion, and the number of blockchain activities that are going on, the number of applications that actually are running, we decided that in order to get standards accelerated to match the pace of uptake, we really have got to divide the blockchain standards world into two models: platform, that upon which you do it, and process, that in which you do it. So at this moment in time, I would suggest to you that my Chinese friends in the standards world have opted to be platform people. So they are doing some excellent work, commendable work, great clarity in driving forward platforms. We also, however, need to develop the processes, the applications that run on those platforms, if we are not to be driven downstream so far that we can never get back up the waterfall. We're not salmon.
Interesting. So, and in that divide, I know in working on a lot of platform that we've done for research for in the state of Colorado in the last 3 years, we've found that the procedure, the people part, is what was missing. The platform could be adopted, the technology could be spun to meet overwhelming needs, but all of a sudden there was this missing piece of governance, and that was kind of the process piece. So what type of we'll say predication do you come into looking at putting that together with in standards organization?
ISO TC307. Sorry about the numbers. I'll keep them as low as possible, but that's the number of the ISO Technical Committee for Blockchain. Mm-hmm. Its work to date is based around creating that, what you called it governance, but governance in and of itself has been found to be in need of passing, even though we object to it in the true blockchain world, because that means we're going back to Turing. We're opening silos. We don't want to do that. We want a data continuum. However, we have foundations, we have security and cybersecurity. These are the working groups. We have smart contracts. We have governance and use cases. The United States contribute to ISO TC307 as a national body. In the United States, we are called INSIGHTS, the International Council for Information Technology Standards. And yes, I chair it. And it's we have, over the last 6 to 9 months, despite being COVIDized and zoomed in, as it were, sort of a lockdown with a zoomed in. What a catastrophic society we live in. But notwithstanding that, we've actually carried out some very dynamic things on behalf of the United States national body, which is to bring forward, in 307's recognition in blockchain, momentum with regard to leaving the core stuff, the nice stuff, the biblical stuff, it's written stone large now, and getting on with doing something that users need. And that for us has been a fabulous 6-month period we've just had. In fact, our latest meeting was just yesterday, and we have representatives from, you name it. We have the big names in cloud computing and in data, and we have the workers as well. We have representatives from NIST, which is a unit of the Department of Commerce. What we're concerned about is, and I gave my chairman's opening remarks yesterday on the subject, Chris, frankly, don't just come over here to pay lip service. Come and use your lips and do some service, because you're absolutely right. You can create the use case. There's oh my goodness, anything you touch, you can make better with blockchain. Not overnight and not simplistically. Let's not delude your listeners into some kind of magic elixir resides in this voice. It doesn't. There's also a reality check. Many people have come to me over my 45 years in standards and said, well, I think we'll have a standard of this. And I'm afraid I've had to say, well, good luck, because you won't get one because it's not doable. Many have come and said, we're going to install RFID in our factory. And I will go down and take a look at it for them. And I'll go, no, you're not. Why? Because their core operating model is broken, right? You don't put blockchain on top of something that is broken. You take blockchain, you build the parallel railway line, then you close down the old steam locomotive line and switch over to high-speed electric. That's my best analogy, Chris.
Yeah. So, you had said when you were talking earlier about the Chinese government looking at it as, having, what works for the third party, them kind of being involved with being a centerpiece. The whole predication of blockchain, and I like to call it distributed ledger because blockchain resembles that cryptocurrency beast, but was to have neutral, no third party involvement. And when we're talking about from the top of standards groups worldwide looking at blockchain. Are we looking at it from the how do we keep third-party involvement out, or how do we make it acceptable and who's able to do it and set parameters around it?
First and foremost, we invite third parties, right? We're not isolationists. But they have to come and play the same game, right? Everybody needs to play an agreed game within agreed principles. This is where ISO comes very much into play, because they have the platform model, and they need to get into that platform model more briskly and more dynamically. Would a disruptive third party disrupt a blockchain? No, because of course, let's remember the golden rule. If you're going to be in a blockchain, you have to be invited to be in the blockchain. You have to be an essential component of that blockchain. If you are the widget supplier to the Ford Motor Company, you may that blockchain in Ford is building a Corsair. I'm sorry if my models are out of date. I don't own a car, would you believe? But if you take that car and all of its components, its design, the whole production management, the whole workflow is in a blockchain. And that blockchain reaches out and recognizes that in that build, it needs, for the next 3 shifts in Ludington, Michigan, 600,000 widgets from Jimmy Smith Manufacturing, who actually gets them from Shenzhen, as we all know. That Jimmy Smith, incidentally, cannot suddenly decide that he's going to make them in his Brazilian plant because the Chinese plant is running late. That's what's wonderful about blockchain, because the Brazilian ones are not quite as good a quality as the ones from Shenzhen and would have caused a disruption. I have so many already amazing, true facts of how blockchain has resolved issues pertaining to third parties, because they're suddenly wholly visible, not casually visible. So the call comes, hello, Jim, we actually switched this supply to the Brazilian plant. Oh, right, that's no problem, Tom, thanks. And off he goes. Well, Tom is in procurement. Now, if he'd just happened to mention that to manufacturing, Eddie or Shirley, they would have gone, oh, no, we had some of those 2 years ago. They're still out the back. They're a subject of a legal dispute about quality. You see, this is blockchain. This is what blockchain is about. This is why I get, as you can see, somewhat over-enthusiastic.
So, but if we look at that top level, somebody might have control over who's allowed to be in the blockchain. And they can say, okay, we are in Shenzhen, so we only let your alternate supplier be in Beijing because we choose that. How do we, from a standards point, say, that third party that has to be neutral? Is that something that we are concerned or see as a need to address?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. And that is that word, the I word, I love to call it, interoperability. There must be a point at which free and open access to a qualified participant in a blockchain must never be able to be dictated by any agency of any kind. I came up through the ranks of the days not that long ago, in my later years still, but where if a company was on SAP, as an example, then you suddenly found out that you needed a thing that talked to SAP because your major client was on SAP, but the other client was on Oracle or EDS, right? Well, that's okay when you're in a silo world, when you're in Turing models, because only that department needs to get that little, Deloitte delivered tweak that tells it to talk in this way to Oracle, but if you're delivering to San Francisco, you need it to go through the SAP messaging. And incidentally, before we go any further, I'm a huge admirer of all of the companies in the consulting for IT world over the last 40 years or so, if not more. And I, in the interest of full disclosure, did work for Deloitte at one time. So what I'm saying is that we can only use standards to create an open access platform, not a not a constrained model at all. So I encourage people to keep their eyes open and make sure that they're not becoming the victim of a closed loop again. And yes, I use the word again.
Again. Yeah, well, we're kind of running to the end of our time here, but I wanted to give you the opportunity to put out to our audience things that you might need help with, how people can get involved with things you're working, and what you might need right now.
Well, first of all, every standards body welcomes expert participation or enthusiastic participation from people seeking to see how it will be for their company to become aware. We're as much an educational body as a standards body often. In so doing, please feel free to reach out to myself. It's very simple. I am John.Greaves at ConsenSysHealth.com, or I have numerous other, or you just go to my LinkedIn page and say, hey, can you talk to me? Yes, I can. Of course I can. We want mostly, frankly, end users, if you don't mind. We have the involvement of the IBMs and etc. Are most welcome and have done excellent work and have created very massive engines of blockchain already. But we are looking for end users, people who go, okay, so what's in it for me? What's my standard going to look like for shipping faucets from Wisconsin, Cola, for instance? Also, please, isn't this funny, Chris? It relates to your concern about Colorado. Please write to your local representative as a business person and as an individual and ask them how come you and your state, your city, your county is going to be last in line to be able to do things with blockchain that show significant cost savings, accelerated response times, and a green environment that you earnestly seek. Ooh, how about that?
Yeah. Definitely. Well, thanks for joining today, John. It's definitely been a pleasure, and we'll have to have you on more to talk about some of these breakdowns at different points here, or even bring some of the people that you have that need to be heard on from the international point to get some messages out. But thanks so much for joining today. Glad we had you.
Thank you so much, Chris. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of New Cyber Frontier. Remember to get involved. Often we think that someone else will handle privacy and security in the virtual world, but you are the only one truly in command of your virtual fate. Join our mailing list so we can keep you informed of breaking news and new releases. If you have an idea, if you have a question that you would like to hear answered, or if you want to get involved with our efforts, reach out to us at newcyberfrontier.com. We also encourage you to visit our sponsors' links, as they are the ones that really make this show possible. I want to thank each of you for supporting the show, and we look forward to seeing you back for the next episode of New Cyber Frontier.